Good evening to you, my friends, and welcome. Tasty whiskey. It's the second time I'm coming at you from today. It's mind blowing. 2 times in one day. What rare and special treat is this? Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But here I am. No, I'm going to check in with Timothy from Kyiv. As you may know, if you've been following me for the past week or two, I've been checking in with this guy's Twitter feed, which has been getting sent to me by my main source on Instagram or through email now. And I'm finding it fascinating because this guy is not a prepper in any way, shape, or form. Not a prepper. He is dealing with an emergency situation, and I find it very fascinating watching him actually go through this sort of stuff, figure it out, and kind of have a bit of a stream of consciousness that he is blurting out to the world via Twitter. So it's very fascinating to watch this. I got to say, I read through his latest like 4 or 5 Twitter threads, and it's really starting to dry up to the point where I was like, I think this is a dry hole. Actually, I might just let this go until he got to his mother-in-law's, and then it was gold. It was absolute gold when he hit his mother-in-law's. So super fascinating stuff, because I think there's a lot of lessons for everyone to learn there. But it's also a generational thing that we're looking at there. So anyway, without any further ado, I'm going to jump into this. Where are we now? We're at day 283 of the war. I want to say this was, we're coming up to 2 weeks. It's maybe 1 week, 5 days, or 1 week, 6 days since the Russian attacks on the electricity infrastructure within Ukraine. And so they've had intermittent power throughout Ukraine, Kyiv, Lviv, which he actually visited. I won't go into his visit to Lviv. It wasn't. Oh no, I will go into that today. But it's a slightly different situation that's going on there. So they're dealing with this. Obviously, weather is getting worse there. It's rapidly dropping in temperature. It's getting colder, so they're having to deal with all these sort of things. So yesterday, he's talking about he was in Lviv. It was hit hard in the previous weeks. No water and electricity for days, but it appears to have recovered. That's one of the main themes, by the way, of most of his tweets, is him talking about the recovery of what's happening. How they rebuilt bridges, how businesses and shops have rebuilt themselves, and they're continuing going, which is interesting. Again, it kind of runs counter to what the narrative that a lot of people get, or a lot of people think war zones or conflict areas are like, where something happens and people just disappear. They just go into a bunker for months on end. They don't. Human beings are quite resilient on the whole, in my experience at least, and they continue doing what they do. So if they have a business and they can keep it running, they keep it running. They rebuild where they can. If they need to rebuild their houses, the structures, whatever it is, they keep doing whatever they can to have some semblance of normalcy in their world. And that's pretty much the picture from the last couple of days that he's painted. Restaurants and social life buzzing around. He's got many photos of this, of him in Lviv. He goes to restaurants. He checks into a hotel. One of the things when he checked into the hotel that was pretty interesting to me is probably one of 3 points from this one. Coffee shops and things like that. He jumps into he's checking into his hotel, and there's a blackout for about 5 minutes. Not a big deal, but they're all set up for it. So they've got little torches that they can also use as lanterns, like those little angle ones. I've got a Makita one for my tool set, just with LED lights. Really handy little things to have, or even stuff like this, like little lantern lights. Super handy piece of equipment, because you can just set that up somewhere. And I've quite often, that one that I just showed you there, I've got a bigger version of that I use out camping. But I've used all these things in blackouts here. So we need light in the kitchen. The kitchen is kind of like a central area in our house at the moment. So it's very dark, and especially at night, extremely dark. So setting up a little light like that in there, super handy thing to have. And yeah, he just talks about the reception having that. He says, the reception used a flashlight that doubles as a lamp. I should get one of those. And a generator started and the lights were back. So it took about 5 minutes for that process to kick in. But yeah, quite an interesting little tidbit there. Just something I said, this is something worthwhile thinking about. How do you light your world? You can go overboard with torches and things like that. Handheld torches are great and fine, but do you have something you can just set somewhere and can actually illuminate a room, or candles, whatever it might be? Another thing which is outside of this, which he actually observed on his way while he's driving to Lviv, was corn. And he actually has a photo of this. I've grown corn in the past, and I know what corn looks like when it is going bad. And that's what this photo of this corn that he's got here is doing. It needs to be harvested very soon. It should have been harvested probably a month or two ago by the looks of it. But it's actually covered in snow. It's like this stuff's going to rot on the what do you call it, a stalk, I guess? Yeah, I'm going to call it a stalk, bean, corn stalk, corn, something. It doesn't matter. Anyway, yeah, this stuff's out there and it's rotting. It's not harvested. And he said, he has actually pointed this out before in previous threads that I've read, and I haven't really pointed it out because it's just a little talk here, like, oh yeah, I saw some fields and they're unharvested. I saw some fields and they're destroyed, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a bit here and there. But this is like the third or fourth time I've read from his writings, him talking about food in particular. So that's another data point, and I want to just highlight that one there, that, again, Ukraine is a huge grower of food. It is one of the most fertile areas within Europe, within the world, actually. This whole stretch that goes from Ukraine up into Russia is an extremely fertile area, and it is known for its growing capacity. And now that's totally curtailed. Can't do that. Last thing he has in this little post here that I found really, really interesting, really good prepping. There is a photo of a family. There's the power's gone off. They're walking around the streets at night. So it's a mother and a father and their little child, and they've got these reflective vests on. So it's like a reflective belt with a cross over it, and it lights up. If you hit it with lights, it's all reflective. It's got like yellow, orange sort of color on it. Really good idea. I've got stuff like this, and I've used it in the past. Mine's actually like a tradies sort of vest that I use, and it's got all this high reflective, high vis sort of stuff on it. I've used it in emergency situations when I'm going up and helping out in emergency situations. Chuck this sort of thing on so you can be identified very quickly. You can be seen from a distance. You can be seen at night very easily. I've used this sort of stuff in rural firefighting capacity as well, that there's always reflective tape on the clothing. And obviously used it when I was in the military as well for safety reasons when we needed to. But it's a really good idea for individuals to have. If this isn't something that's part of your preps, really think about that. Being caught out at night without any sort of reflective safety vest or anything like that. Peter Rouse says, I may or may not have a police safety vest. Very handy thing to have. Certainly, the CFA RFS, which is the volunteer firefighting service within Australia, that sort of equipment always has these sorts of reflective tape and things like that on it. Also very handy in an emergency too. You can chuck that on and be identified easily if you want to. Anywho, so that was the interesting part from that one. Now I'm going to skip forward a few days. Timothy is actually visiting his wife's mum. Not sure where it is, but I assume it's somewhere within Kyiv. Now I'll reiterate this, that this dude here is like pretty well off, as far as I can tell. He's a professor at a university. He used to have a lot to do with and still does have a lot to do with the government there. But he's pretty rich, as far as I can tell, or not rich, but well off. And whenever he says, "Oh, I needed this, so I just went and bought it," so he's clearly got money there. Now he's visiting his wife's mum, who, as far as I can tell, isn't as well off or lives in a poorer part of town or something like that. But there's some super interesting stuff that's happening here. I have no idea how old his mother-in-law is, but he's got a photo there. I'm going to hazard a guess here. I'm going to say maybe somewhere high 60s to high 70s. I'm really crap at judging age. Could even be, no, I wouldn't say 80, but somewhere in that sort of decade. 68, 69 to 78, 79, somewhere in that sort of space, I'm going to guess. So generational gap difference, and I'm going to say socioeconomic gap difference between this dude and the mother-in-law. First thing he comes out with, she cooks with candles and always keeps hot water in thermos to make tea and breakfast. This like right off the bat, this reminds me of a little saying that's been out there that I've seen quite a few times, but I can't remember where I originally saw it. Prepping is what our grandparents called living. What we see nowadays as a crazy prepper, as some sort of extremist who wants to go live their own life out in the wilderness or just off grid, like a crazy man or woman, was very normal 1 to 2 generations ago. That was just living. That's how it was done. I'm always quite interested when I go and sit down and talk to grandparents or parents, my in-laws or whatever, whoever it is, how they grew up and the things they were doing and how they actually heated their homes, how they cooked their food, how they, got rid of their waste products and things like that. Always fascinated to hear those stories because they had to do it without all the modern conveniences that we have now. So again, all this stuff that we call prepping, it's actually just normal living for the majority of human beings really on the earth right now, being that the majority of human beings on the earth right now are living in a state that we would call, from our perspective, close to poverty or below the poverty line. This is also somebody who lived in the USSR. So this is somebody who was in their prime, was an adult, was living their life and working and doing their things in communist Russia. Ukraine was part of the USSR. So when they were living, up until 1989, after the fall, or I think it was like 92 or 3, somebody can correct me on that Ukraine actually sort of formally created its own thing. But 89, the wall came down. So that was the fall of USSR. So after that period, we think of it as a different thing. But before that, in the USSR is how these people were living. So different perspectives, right? Different generations. We have somebody who I'm assuming probably he's visiting his in-laws. I'm assuming his in-laws probably have 30, 35 years on him, at least. I could be totally wrong there, but it would be anywhere from 25 to maybe 40 years of them. But first, we have to get to her apartment on the 7th floor. Remember, I've been talking about this. He lives on the 8th floor, and he has been documenting his difficulties in getting stuff up to the 8th floor because he has to walk up steps. And this, leads me to my point that I always like to chuck in there. Physical fitness, physical capability is an essential part of your preparations. It has to be. It absolutely has to be. It's one of the things you should be focusing on first and foremost. Mindset, physical ability. So he's going there. He's like, oh, this is going to be a problem getting up to the 7th floor. There's no electricity. So because of the electricity problems, we could not get inside the building. The mother-in-law decided to walk down to open the door for us. We did not want her to climb back up 7 floors. So they tried to dissuade her, but they failed. So they were saying, no, don't come down. We'll find another way. We'll wait till someone else comes in, or, I don't know what they're saying, but probably something like that. She said, no, She's walked down 7th floor, opened the door, and then walked them back up the 7 floors. It's no big deal. She's getting to see her family, all right? This is, maybe the highlight of her week. I don't know, but she's like, I get to see my daughter, I get to see my son-in-law. This is great. 7 floors, that's nothing. That's nothing to me. I have to do it every day anyway. So she's going up and down these 7 floors. But it's interesting that he points it out because of what he's talked about before, the 8 floors being a problem for him. 7 floors for somebody who, like I said, is, let's just say 73 years old or 70 years old, not a problem. He really starts to dig into this, though. He really starts to dig into this generation gap. He identifies it. He's fully aware of his privilege, of his shortcomings and his weaknesses. It's one of the things I like about reading this guy's stuff. He's not like, I've got this, I'm killing it, I'm blah, blah, blah. He's like, I didn't realize this. Oh, wow, I'm shortfall here. Oh, when he's talking about he can't get the generator up eight flights of stairs, he's not saying it was a heroic effort to get that generator up my 8 flights of stairs. He's going, wow, that was a struggle. I did not realize it was a struggle. Like, everyone needs to think about this. His mother-in-law's name's Valentina. Valentina's neighbors show superiority of ingenuity over wealth. Superiority over ingenuity over wealth. So he's saying that even though he lives somewhere that's affluent, he's looking at all the people of his mother-in-law's apartment block, and her included, and saying these people are more ingenious than, and that's working better than us wealthy people. They've set up blackout lights in hallways, a diode powered by AA batteries. Blackout lights in our building, where half of the people drive Mercedes and BMWs. The cost of convenience, I guess, the cost of wealth, the thing that we don't often think about when we're thinking about real wealth, what real wealth is. I've talked about this in the past. Like, I don't think money is very far away from real wealth. It's a symbol, and that goes some way to showing us, somebody's worth, I guess, or somebody's ability to generate wealth. But it is not real wealth, not in any way, shape, or form. It is way back from real wealth. So these people here are showing this, and he admits that. He's like, hey, I live in an apartment where most of the people drive Mercedes and BMWs. We didn't figure out that you can hook up a little diode to a AA battery and light a hallway, so we're not walking around in the dark using our iPhone 14s to light the way the entire time. Valentina's building is a testament to the battle between the past and the future in Ukraine. The windows in hallways, lobbies, stair areas are new and energy efficient. But the doors are from Soviet times. The future is winning, but slowly. I don't know. He goes on talking about how his mother-in-law has to feed them. Doesn't matter what she's got in the cupboard. It's part of the Ukrainian, Eastern European. There are many cultures like this. I know Italians are like this. I know where have I got people from? I was about to say Chechnya. It's not Czechoslovakia is like this. Slovaks are like this. Like, you walk into that house, you will get fed. There is no if, buts, or maybes. You're going to get fed. And he talks about that. Ukrainian pancakes and oatmeals. I don't know what that is, but he seems to think they're clean, minimalist, healthy, and very tasty. She makes them a coffee in Turka, which is a traditional Turkish coffee where you put the coffee in, you put water and you boil it in there. Kieran says, Yugoslav friends feed me the best. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, same, actually. So she's cooking in this cup. It's a traditional cup. It's probably about 40 years old, which means it's from USSR era cup. Still getting used, though. This is one of the things. Again, this generational difference. We're seeing that difference between people who are having things that they continue to use. And I've said this. I think I said this last podcast. Things made in the past are better. Like, they were made better. Not always. Definitely not always. But definitely things were made better. There are things that I've still got from the 80s, maybe a little bit into the 90s. But I've got things from the 70s. I've got things from the 60s, even before then, that have stood the test of time. Coffee cup right here. Simplest way of making coffee as well. One of the simplest ways of making coffee. Whenever there is electricity, Valentina boils water and stores it in thermoses. Just prepping, just thinking about these things, like, what's going to happen next. Is it enough to have warm breakfast or hot tea every morning? Talks about how she works in the hospital, leaves. She's not there most of the day. When she comes home in the evening, there's typically no electricity in the evenings. So here's her basic setup: to make fried eggs and other basics, like warm food for dinner. Gets candles and a very thin baking pan, and then just uses the candles to heat that pan and then cooks on that. Valentina also saves food. Here is cabbage put in salt water by a heater. It ferments, and we get a Ukrainian version of sauerkraut that can be stored forever. I don't know about forever, but sauerkraut can be stored. I've made sauerkraut in the past, and it can be stored for a very long time. Kieran says they don't make them like they used to. Absolutely right. Yeah. He starts talking about a whole heap of stuff he starts getting off her as well. The father-in-law passed away just before the war. I think he says his parents have passed away too. I think that's what he's trying to say, a few years ago. They were born around World War II. He says he's got a photo of it. This is Natalia's dad's, that's his wife, dad's toolbox that we will now use in our home. So they're taking the father-in-law's toolbox. There's some other things that he says they're in photos. I haven't got the photos, but they're taking home to his. The toolbox was really interesting though. So this is an old man's toolbox, right? And that he's taking it home. I don't know what the reason is for that. I can only hazard a guess that he probably doesn't have tools of his own, or a comprehensive set of tools. This was actually one thing that I learned from my father, who was a handyman. He was a jack of all trades. He just did stuff. That was my dad. He did stuff. He was born in 1937, and I grew up throughout the 80s and 90s watching this dude just do stuff, right? It didn't matter what it was. Was there something wrong with the car? He'd have a look. Maybe he couldn't fix it, but he'd give it a crack. Oh, there's something wrong in the house. He'd fix it. The heating doesn't work. I'll pull it apart and I'll try and fix it. He was always doing stuff. He was a salesman too. It's not like he did this for a job. He was a salesman because he could talk like a friggin', he could talk with a mouthful of marbles underwater, that dude. But yeah, he just did stuff. He just knew how to do things. And he always had tools. He always had a really comprehensive set of tools. And it's one thing that got passed down to me. And now I've got all manner of tools and a shed that is filled with random shit. Thanks, Dad, for that lesson. Because it's like, oh, wait, I need to fix something. Oh, here's something. Making moonshine whiskey. Not this one, but I was making some whiskey the other day with a mate. And he came over and he's like, do you have any wire? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Sort through some stuff. Here's some wire. There's always something you can use with this stuff. But it's just something I want you to think about as well. Again, I'm reading out this guy's stories because it is important to look at sort of stuff and go, well, here's somebody who's living through an emergency. This person is living through an emergency and is very rapidly learning hard lessons on what works, hard lessons on what does not work, hard lessons on shortfalls in his preparations, which, to be fair, his preparations were nil, well, next to nil for this coming crisis. But he's having to go through this now. So you can see him collecting up these sorts of things. So if you ever get your chance to get your hands on your dad's toolbox, do it. Do it. I wish I had my dad's tools. I don't. I had to go out and buy all mine my own. And I'm buying stuff nowadays. Like I hunt antique stores. I hunt little market stalls and flea markets and things like that for tools that are older than I am. Because, man, the amount of stuff that I bought from the hardware store that's made in the last 3-4 years, I know that I'm going to be replacing it. Doesn't matter what it is. I know I'm going to be replacing whatever that thing is within 5 years. Metal things, still replacing them within 5 years. Stuff just does not stand up to the rigors of the real world anymore. Peter Rouse says, hard to find tools not made in China. That's absolutely correct. And this is my gripe with it. It's like, if you can find stuff, usually like if it says like made in USA or something, that's a pretty good sign that it's going to be probably a little bit better. They're still making some good tools. There are still places making good tools, depending on what tool you're talking about. But yeah, a lot of it that's coming out of China, not so great. Not so great. I just want to finish off with this little paragraph. I read this and I didn't understand it at first. I was just like, oh, okay. And then I thought about this paragraph and I wasn't going to include it, but I think this really sums up our world where it's at. And just to get you thinking, or just to leave you on this note, there was a graffiti sign outside of Natalia's apartment. It was just painted over. Before, it said, Natalia, I love you. Someone fell in love with her when Natalia was in the 5th grade. The confession stayed on the wall for more than 20 years. And it just got painted over. That I think, like, that a profession of love, it doesn't really matter what it was. It's a piece of graffiti and it was there for 20 years. And it's just being painted over. And I feel like there's something about this. Like I said, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I decided to chuck it in there because it's telling me something about the world we live in now. We don't give a shit about anything old anymore. We want to paint it all over. We want new. We want fresh. And I get that. I look at shiny things. I look at new technology. I look at fancy stuff, and I'm like, hey, I'm a man of means now. I've earned my way in the world at the moment, and I can afford some stuff, so I'm going to do it. And I buy some shiny new Hilux Ute or whatever. But there is something to be said for the old stuff, and that's really the theme that I wanted to wrap it up on today. That was in this thread here. Definitely consider that. Consider the old technologies. Consider what worked in the past. Actually, go and look at this. Go and look at what we had to do in the past in order to get by, in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to live our everyday lives, and maybe start to lean into that a little bit more. So yeah, consider that today. Go buy an old axe. That's actually not an old axe. That was probably made in the last year or two, but it's based on an old axe, and it was made in an old way too. It was made using traditional methods. All right, I've just got the knock on the door, which means my lasagna's ready. Mom, where's the lasagna? No, it's not Mum at all. It's my partner. Shouldn't call her Mum. Although she will be Mum soon, so maybe. Anyway, that's getting a bit too personal. I'll cut it there, gang. Hope you get as much out of Timothy's little threads as I do. I always find them fascinating, and there's always something out or something in them that I am learning from. And I'm enjoying learning from his stories. I don't know how long this will keep going, but as long as there's something in there that I find interesting, I'll probably continue to put these up. So let me know if you're finding them interesting. Let me know if you want me to just cut it away and just get on with the serious news, because tomorrow morning I'll probably be back with another one, another SitRep. That situation that I was talking about this morning in Russia, it could be developing into something else. There are some other things that are going on there. So I'm keeping my finger on the pulse on that one. If that develops any further, be assured I will be talking about it tomorrow. But apart from that, Stay safe out there. Remember, you can always cook your dinner using candles and a thin pan, and don't paint over graffiti if it's professing love. That's it for today, gang. Thank you very much for joining me again. I really appreciate it. Or, as always, I really appreciate everyone who's hitting the like buttons, hitting the subscribe buttons, and sharing this stuff. I am always utterly humbled by everyone who wants to jump on here and listen to me. So hopefully I am not wasting your time and giving you something worthwhile. All right. Stay safe out there. And as always, Semper Paratus.